Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Grain Merchant Kickstarter launch party. My name is Zara Altair, and I am the author of the Argolicus Mysteries. And the Grain Merchant is the newest Argolicus Mystery, and it is the first full-length mystery. So I'm very excited about this project. And I am very excited about this, my first Kickstarter project. So welcome. I really want to welcome everyone who's here. And also that I woke up this morning and I had pledges. I was just so astounded. I hadn't done anything. This is the official launch to friends and family and supporters, people that I know, people on the newsletter list for fans of Argolicus. And I'm just really, really excited about all of that. So I wanted to share some things about the story and about the background today, just to let you know a little bit more than the information that is on Kickstarter. So first, let's go to Infinity Hall. I'm going to share my screen. And here we go. So first of all, I just want to thank you for being here. I really want to thank you for being here. It's so exciting for me. I have never done a Kickstarter project before. It was all new to me. And just a little information about Kickstarter. It's a crowdfunding platform, which means many people pledge, donate, whatever you want to call it, to support a project. And the Grain Merchant is the book. And this project is funding several things. I'm going to go into them in detail, but I want to mention them right now. It's the cover for the paperback book. We already have the fantastic design from Ryan Rhodes at Reformation Designs, but we're going to put together the whole book cover for the paperback, and also 2 editing passes from the fantastic Marcus Trower, who is an editor who specializes in crime and mystery, among other things. And then I want to, some people are not familiar with Kickstarter, or you've heard about Kickstarter, but you know how it works. And as I mentioned, it's crowdfunded. It's multiple people backing a project. So you back the project at $1 level to raise funds, and backers are charged their pledge if the goal is reached. The project lasts for a certain amount of time, and in this case, it's 30 days. And today is the very first day that the project is open. And if the goal is reached in the time frame, all systems are go. Yay, whoa, you know, the manuscript goes off to the editor, the designer sets up the template and creates the cover for the paperback. And later on, once the book is finalized, it goes into production. So it takes quite a time from the start of the project until backers receive their reward. So it's not an instant reward. So that's another way I want to thank you for having faith and going with a project that takes some time to do things. And one more note, if the funding goal is not reached by the end date, the backers are not charged. The whole thing, all bets are off. No money, nobody gets charged, and the project as it is set up right now doesn't get funded. So one of the reasons I'm doing this project today is that a good start kicks the project towards success. People are attracted to winners, And when they see that other people are backing a project, it's all psychological. And when they see that other people are backing a project, then um, they want to say, oh, whoa, you know, this looks like a good thing. And they may chip in. Whereas if a project has nothing, people just tend to be a little more skeptical. So here we are, the first day, and I'm very excited. I have backers already. I just can't believe it. I'm just so excited. I'm just totally thrilled. So what you can do today is you can help by launching the project. So go to the Kickstarter project, and here is a shortened link for you because the real one's super long. It's http://bit.ly/ks for Kickstarter, the Grain Merchant. And if you go there, you can check out the rewards, choose your backer level, and back the Grain Merchant. It's that simple. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing for just a sec. And this is such a technological craziness because hi, Ren. Thanks so much. Ren Shell, who is another mystery writer, says, congratulations for full-length mystery. Quite an achievement. It is. Well, it's kind of fun because it gives me more room to play with themes, shorter stories, 30,000 words or so. It's kind of all, you know, going in one direction. But with the length of a novel, I'm able to play with more themes, and I'm going to talk about those a little bit later. And Rin, thank you so much. Also, I'd like to mention that you can follow Rin on YouTube. She does these fantastic paintings, and she teaches you how to do them. And her specialty is wildlife, kitties, and flowers, because she also, in her spare time, I don't know how she does everything, in her spare time has a beautiful, beautiful garden that she works on with her husband, Reg. So, Rin, thanks so much for being here. Brush with Nature Studio, thank you. That's what it's called. So go check it out on YouTube. She really has a lot of amazing tips about painting. And I think one of the things that's really wonderful about being a creative person, a writer, an artist, is how supportive the rest of the community is. I know I'm in several author groups and writing groups, and everybody is just so supportive and go out of their way to help other people learn things and do new things. And it's really a wonderful life. So anyway, today I want to thank everyone for being here. I just want to tell you the technology I'm dealing with today. We're here on YouTube. I am actually broadcasting from Hangouts, so I have to flip back and forth. So if I want to show you more slides, then I need to go over to the Hangout and share my screen. So I'm going to do that right now and talk a little bit about the background for the stories, because the world of Argolicus is set in long ago Italy in the early 6th century, and it is in southern Italy, right at the tip, at the boot. Well, if you think of Italy as a boot, that's where these stories take place. And it is a very lush area. And at the time of the stories, it was the breadbasket. And then the hero of these stories is named Argolicus. He was a real person, although we really don't know very much about him. He was mentioned in Cassiodorus' letters called the Varii. And I'm not going to tell you too much about them except broad strokes, because every reader creates a picture in their mind of what a character looks like. But I will tell you some basic details. He's tall and fair with blonde curls. He's born and raised in Brutia in southern Italy, and he has a Roman father and an Ostrogoth mother. And of course, because of the two cultures, he has some clashes with people, say Romans, who were snobs about his mixed heritage. On the other hand, he was raised in what we would call the Roman tradition, so he has a classical education in Greek and Latin and mathematics. And he also has what was considered a true classical education, and that's in athletics and fighting. And right before this story start, he was appointed, and this is something we know from Cassiodorus' letters, he was appointed as urban prefect in Rome, and he was considered a parvenu because, you know, he was somebody from the South. It's the same today. People from the South is like, well, you know, that's the faraway part of Italy. And it's the same thing. He wasn't from Rome. So he was considered a parvenu. And then I want to tell you a little bit about how I kind of formed his character. And you can see here on top, we have Roberto Saviano, who's actually major hero in Italy. And down below, you see my son, Zachary. And Zachary is a very logical person. And so a lot of the ways that Argolicus behave are based from my personal experience with a very cool person, my son. So in the story, and all the stories that have come before, Argolicus has an estate above the town of Scolace, and it's quite large, and there's lots of agriculture that goes on there, and he is what we would call today landed gentry. So that kind of gives you a picture of who he is. But when the grain merchant starts, he decides to go back to town and open up his family home, which has been closed for 17 years since his father died, and open up the house and set up life in town rather than live with his mother. So this is kind of generic representation of what that town home looked like. This is the front entrance, which would be on the street, and these little cubby holes that you see here was something that happened, were like shops, and the owners of these large homes rented out these shops. And so there were always people in front of the home. And also, as you went inside here, there was a doorman who kept track of the door and actually slept by the door so that the door was always guarded. And then a couple of the rooms that are mentioned frequently in the stories are first the atrium, which is the main public room. That's where people come in and people chatted and hung out. And as you can see here, the roof, this is an open area right here, and the roof is slanted. And when it rained, the rain came down and fell into this pool. And there was a deep reservoir under this pool. And then I mentioned a number of times that Argolicus has his father's old study, and that's going to be right here off of the atrium. I'm just going to kind of walk you through the house. And then where the family loved to hang out was back here underneath in the peristylum. And it was like a courtyard with flowers and plants, and it was like a garden. And because of the Mediterranean weather, it was a pleasant place to be. But as you can see, it's quite far away from the street. So to give you a better picture of where the story takes place, this was at the time of the story. The Ostrogoths ruled Italy, Sicily, and all of the area which we would now call the Balkans. So they had an extensive rule. But as you can see down here, this is where these stories take place. The capital of Italy was not Rome. It was Ravenna. And so these people, even though they're ruled by the Ostrogoths, they're far, far away from the capital city. So the south of Italy is really Argolicus' home. And you see here, there's beautiful oceans, and then rolling hills. And up here in the back are big, big mountains. Okay, and then I'm going to stop sharing for a while and talk to everybody like a real person. I'm so excited to be here and to be in this Kickstarter program. And yes, it is interesting about the atrium. I think it's really interesting that, you know, those big spaces, the biggest spaces in the house were open. You know, rain came in. If it snowed, not very frequently in the South, but if it snowed, snow came in, and we just had it was very, very open once you came inside. And I love that. I have a patio at my home, and I go out there quite frequently. I take my breaks out there, and I watch the sky and watch the trees. It's not the same as having an open and closed courtyard, but that same feeling of being outside and hearing things and all of that. So yes, it's a very interesting way to live, and they are not closed to the sky. So the weather really had a lot of influence on life. It isn't how we think of it today, where we go inside and the weather is out there somewhere. Weather was very, very present. When it was cold, one of the things that happened is they had little braziers with coals, and they would set them around the rooms to keep people warm. So there was really no central heating as we think of it. So they use these little braziers to keep themselves warm in the winter months when it was cool. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about Kickstarter, because there's something brand new for me, and I'm really kind of excited. This is my first day, so I'm excited about it, and I'm a little bit nervous, but I think that goes with doing any new project about anything. Is, you know, it's like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I just pushed the launch button, and it's really quite amazing. But I think it's just a reflection of the community that artists create, and how we all support each other, and how community works, and that we as artists, I'm trying to think how to say this, that we as artists um, have a way to find patrons and to thank them. And I'm going to talk in a little bit, I'm going to talk about the rewards at Kickstarter. It isn't like you give money and then nothing happens. It's a very special deal. And Kickstarter is just it's a very exciting program. I have actually backed a couple of programs in Kickstarter, and that was very exciting for me as a backer. They weren't book projects at all; they were other things, but they were fun, and so I had a little tiny personal experience with Kickstarter before I decided to do this Kickstarter project. And I'll give you a little background about that too. I was there's a group of fellows in England. They're based in London, and they started a project called Readsy, and this was also about community, and this was community for authors. And they, hi Jeff. Jeff, it's my little brother from another mother. We've known each other since 1985. Hi, Jeff. I'm so glad. I'm going to answer your question in a minute. And now I've lost my train of thought. Oh, gosh. It was about Kickstarter, something about Kickstarter. I'm sorry, I really lost it. So Jeff asked, how long did it take you to build your Kickstarter campaign? You know what, Jeff, that's a really good question, because you just actually perked my memory about what I was talking about. These fellows started a program called Readsy, and they decided that authors needed a place where they could have. This, by the way, is Tidy, who likes his pets. Tidy, you're not going for the camera, but he wants his pets. They put together a program where they vet people who support authors. So people like Tidy just mellow out. They have editors, they have cover designers, they have marketing people, PR people, all professionals, all vetted by the folks at Readsy, where authors can go and find the right people for their project. So one of the things for this Kickstarter program is that I found the editor for the book, Marcus Trower, through Readsy. And I'm very excited to be working with him. We've had a number of email conversations, and I sent him some sample chapters, and he was excited about working on the project, which actually makes a difference. Editors, one, that are familiar with your genre, and two, are excited about your particular book. I think it really makes a big difference in synchronicity and how we put together the final version of the book. So, to get to Jeff's question, how long did it take to build the Kickstarter campaign? This campaign I discovered it with Readsy, because I've been following them since they first started. And they said there's a new project that we're working jointly with Kickstarter and with Prolific Works, which is a book distribution service for authors to build awareness. They used to be called Instafreebie, and now they call themselves Prolific Works. And Prolific Works actually did a course. So that's how this started. And that course started in November. So it's taken a while, Jeff. And there really are a lot of pieces to put together just to formulate the Kickstarter project. Creating the videos, creating the script, creating the rewards and their levels, naming them, doing the graphics for the Kickstarter project. A lot of pieces that come together, and so I would say if you're considering doing a Kickstarter project, either for publishing or anything else, that you really give yourself time to put together a sound program and to make all the pieces come together. Hi, David, the Goths. Yes. And maybe I'll talk about the Goths next, because it's really interesting about Theodoric. When I first started doing research for these books, Goths is not exactly what we think about when we think of today Goths and Ostrogoths and Visigoths and all that. So I think we can do that right now. Anyway, let me finish about doing a Kickstarter campaign. It takes a lot of thought. It takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of what I call rhino work, the stuff you do behind the scenes that nobody ever sees. Just creating the graphics and really thinking about how you're going to put the whole campaign together, what it is you want to include in your funding program, and what it is that you want to leave out of the funding program. So, David, let me see if I can find that spot in the. I'm going to find that spot about Theodoric in the slideshow, and then I can do that. I am not presenting in the slideshow, as you can see, in presenter mode, because I'm just I'm managing all these technical things at once, and it's not one of my areas of expertise, so you just have to be patient with me. So I'm going back to Hangouts, and I'm going to share the screen. We go to Infinity Hall. And as I mentioned a little earlier, Theodoric's kingdom was all of Italy plus a lot of the Balkans, and then this little kind of disputed area. But let's talk about Theodoric for a minute. I think a lot of people, when they think of the Ostrogoths, they think of, these wild, crazy barbarians. That's what the Romans called them, barbarians. And this one just cracks me up. This is so romanticized, I can't even believe it. But anyway, that is a thought. And you know what? I kind of believe that that's kind of true at the beginning, because the Ostrogoths came from Italy, from the Balkan area. They crossed the Danube and came down into Italy and went to Milano first. But what happened was that in his life, Theodoric lived for 10 years in the imperial palace in Constantinople. So he was really hip to what it was like in the emperor's court. And so he in his role as king, which is as far as he could get in Italy, his imperial self-image was very, very Roman. So he dressed in silks. he had what we could just very stylized on this coin, but he had what we call a Roman haircut, a little mustache, and a little beard. You know, so he wasn't a rough-hewn barbarian as we would think about it. He was very Roman in his thinking. Let me just go on with that, and I'll give you a little background about how they did come out of the Balkans. This is actually how all of these Argolicus stories started. I'll tell you this story. I was talking with my daughter one day, and she was like, "Mommy, you know, the place in Italy that you would really like is Ravenna." And then she started in on this story, blah, 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 you know, uh, and this king led his people across the frozen Danube and down into Italy, and then he became king of Italy, blah, blah. And I was like, wow, I wonder what it was like to live then. And that is exactly how these stories got started, because the more I started researching, the more interesting it became. And then when Theodoric actually, this is one of my favorite, man, you really have to dig into research to find stuff. When Theodoric became king of Italy, there was another barbarian king in Italy, Odoacer, and he sent one of his generals to Theodoric, who was over near Milan on the other side of Italy, and said, "Listen, you want to come here? We'll show you the way. This is my trusted general, and he'll show you the way, and everything will be fine." And so Theodoric led all his people, thousands of people, let's say 20,000, okay? This is a big migration. They're going from Milan to Ravenna, and led by this trusted advisor from Odoacer. And he led them along, and they came to a valley, and they were ambushed. And thousands of people were killed, generals were killed, and things were not good between Theodoric and Odoacer from that time forward. And then there were battle to win Ravenna, which took quite a long time, and finally two people sneaked in on boats under the gates, because the river ran through Ravenna at that time, and floated into Ravenna and opened the doors, opened the gates of the wall. It was a wall city. You can still see the wall if you go to Ravenna today. It's really amazing. It's amazing. And Theodoric and his troops entered Ravenna, and they captured the kingdom. And once the kingdom was captured, he invited Odoacer and his generals to a dinner to say, you know, well, hey, you know, we're in charge now, but come to this dinner and we'll all celebrate. And the story goes that at this dinner, Theodoric himself got up and killed Odoacer, and then there was a general slaughter of all of those people. And in my research, you know, scholars were puzzling, and you know, I don't know, it was always about civility and loyalty and all these things. Why did he do this? Why did he do this? And finally, in one of my books in Italian, about the history of Theodoric, I read about this massacre betrayal in the canyon, and I went, oh, okay, now it all makes sense. He gave his word and he broke his word. And your word was pretty much all you had in Gothic society. And so it all made sense to me. I think scholars are still debating about all this stuff. But as far as I was concerned, what better reason than that kind of betrayal for killing the person who had betrayed him and all of his people. So just to go on, David, Theodoric had a lot of accomplishments. Once he became king, he did a lot of building. He built new buildings. He restored old buildings. He did a lot of land reclamation for crops and growing things. And in general, his reign was quite prosperous. And the other thing he did was he had a lot of, he fostered religious tolerance. I guess that's the best way to put it. He fostered religious tolerance. So I think when we think of Theodoric as an Ostrogoth, we have to remember that his vision of himself was as royalty, as a king, and that he dressed and conducted his court in the, quote, Roman mode, the Roman being not Rome, but Constantinople. So he's a much more sophisticated being than I think a lot of people who just hear the word Ostrogoth, much more sophisticated than that. He was a mixture of the two cultures. David, do you have any questions about that, or is there anything that you want to ask about that? I've been researching this stuff for quite a long time, so if you have any questions, you can certainly go ahead and ask me. But anyway, thank you very much for stopping by, and I really appreciate you being here. And you asked a great question, because I was already ready to talk about it. I just, we covered that, and I like that. I've done a lot of reading. I did go to Ravenna. I should tell you this story. I did go to Ravenna, and I met with history professors in the main at the Università di Bologna, but there's actually a branch, a campus, as it were, in Ravenna, and these historians, they were just all like amazed that this crazy woman from the west coast of the United States was interested in this specific time period and finding things, and they were so generous with their time, with asking questions, with they gave me 32 kilos. So what is that, 60 something pounds of books. Of course, I couldn't just slip them in my suitcase. I had to ship them home. They were super generous. They answered a lot of questions for me, but I do have to say that my daughter, the same one who was telling me about Theodoric and got all this thinking process started, my daughter went to university in Italy. She actually went in Venice, and she would tell me these stories of what it was like to talk to professors there. And I'm so glad she told me these stories, because it gave me a clue of how to proceed with these professors. Because what you have to do in Italy, even if you're not a student, I wasn't a student, I was just this crazy lady, who was interested and had all these questions. And you have to prove that you know what you're talking about, I guess, is the easiest way to do that. So I went to this one professor, and his specialty was, it was ships and something. It wasn't commerce. It was something else. He had two specialties. But I wanted to go in and ask him about ships, and I had a book with me that had a picture of a ship on it. And I said, so in 514, were the ships that were in the harbor, did they look like this? I said, because Theodoric didn't start his boat shipbuilding project till 520. I think it was 520. And he said, no, 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 no. And I just love this story. It's so amazing. And he rummaged around on a bookshelf and he pulled out a book and he said, here's this. And I said, no, that can't be it. That's the Visigoths in Spain, and that's 10 years later. And then he pulled out another book. And so we went through this for 40 minutes of him pulling out examples and my saying no, and the reasons why those ships weren't the right ones. And then I swear to you, I held up the same book, the same picture, and said, so the ships in the harbor at Classe, which is the port right next to Ravenna, would look like this. And he said, yes. And I was like, okay, I know how this process works. I'm so grateful to my daughter for telling me how she had to go through the same thing when she was taking classes. Ah, David, very good point. I have some old and very nasty accounts to settle with the Visigoths exactly because of religious intolerance. Yes, I think one of the many ways that Theodoric stood out was his religious tolerance. He fostered, there was, I don't remember what year it was. I'm really not good with years. But there was a kind of disgruntled rumbling and upset in Ravenna against the Jews. And Theodoric was like, stop. This does not happen here. We have religious tolerance. And throughout his reign, he fostered religious tolerance. So he was very different. Yes, the Visigoths were... I think, David, they're actually more of what we think of as the Goths, you know, and warring and all of that stuff. Theodoric made alliances with them, of course. He married off one of his daughters to the Visigoths in Africa. That was a good question. So if you have any more, feel free to ask. Oh my gosh, I am so excited. I'm just so excited that this is happening. I think one of the things about writing historical novels is the process that's involved. At least my process. My process is gathering a lot of information. You know, those 32 kilos of books, reading in Italian, and also because I was in Ravenna, I got to go into libraries and read there. I couldn't check them out. I couldn't check the books out, of course, so I had to read there in the libraries. But just getting a general sense, and getting that general sense so I could question a professor and say, no, this has to be the type of ship that that was in the harbor at 514. So gathering all this general knowledge, but as anyone who is a writer will know, when you're creating a story, things pop up. And so the more general knowledge you have, there's always some little detail. And you're like, oh my gosh, you know, how did they light their rooms? And it always cracks me up when I see, you know, movies or TV series of uh, Romans with candles burning, and they are wax candles. That's not what happened. So, finding out those details, finding out, actually in the used virgin, there are chickens. Argolicus inadvertently opens a chicken coop and gets attacked by a rooster. And I had to find out about chickens, and they were, and that prestigious Romans kept them as, you know, a thing. It was like, because they came from the East, it was like keeping a giraffe. I mean, and they were exotic. They weren't what we think of now as farmyard animals. They were exotic creatures that rich people had. And he, in that story, is visiting the governor, Venantius, also a real person, um, and and he has these exotic chickens. So details, as you're writing stories, there are details that send you off on these, you know, rabbit holes of research to figure out just exactly how that would be or what would happen and how people dressed or how slaves dressed or all those things. I think another thing that's really important um, is I think one of the if David is still here, one of the reasons there was religious tolerance was something important to Theodoric, was that um, there was a lot of religious intolerance, and there was a lot of infighting just among Christians. And actually, I have some slides about that. So let me see if I can go through this long trek of finding stuff, and we can talk about that for a minute, because it was one of the ways in which Theodoric was unique. Now I'm not finding my Hangout, so hold on a second. There we go. Okay, screen sharing. Sorry, you guys, I'm just not a techno whiz. I don't have two monitors, so we just have to bear with the Infinity Hall and what goes on there. So, see if I can find this. So the Christian divisions, depending on who was emperor at the time in Constantinople. Remember, the Roman Empire was ruled from Constantinople, not Rome, right? And so there were there were a lot more. Well, I'm not going to go into theology here, but there were three basic divisions. There were the Monophysites, and that was the Emperor Anastasius, and they believed in one God. All right. There were the Arians. That was a a religious belief that had happened from a man called Arius, and they believed that the Father and the Son were one, but they did not believe in the Trinity or the Holy Spirit. And then the Romans and the Italians were Trinitarian, and they followed the religious doctrine of the Council of Nicaea, which set up the three persons of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So those Christian divisions were, I don't know how to liken them to anything in our modern life. They were very, very strong. Monks revolted about things, and monks revolted, and the what we call the Ostrogoths. I should mention this right now. They did not call themselves Ostrogoths. They called themselves the people. Theodoric talked about our people, and they called it our language. And so the name Ostrogoth was created by not historians. I'm trying to think of it. It wasn't archaeologists either, but scholars much later on. As far as they were concerned, they were the people. That's how they referred to themselves. Their language was their language, and their religion was their religion. And as far as they were concerned, their religion was actually older than the Trinitarian religion, and so they felt that that was the true religion. I'm not going to get into long theological debates here, but because of these three, some emperors were monophysites, some were Trinitarian at this time, and some wobbled between one and the other. So there was a lot of, I'm going to stop sharing again. There was a lot of discord about religion. There was a lot of discord about the nature of Christ, and it's something that we don't really think about today. But these were so strong. There were barroom brawls over things like this. So, hi, guess what, folks? Ryan, who is the cover designer, is here. Thanks, Ryan, for stopping by. I'm so excited about this project. And Ryan, let me see if I can find you a quick picture here. Ryan did the cover design. He's done cover design actually for all my books, and Ryan is just absolutely fabulous to work with. If you're looking for graphic design of any kind, I highly recommend Ryan. Not just for screen share is not working. Here we go. Infinity Hall. Here we are, the cover for The Grain Merchant. And if you go to the Kickstarter page, there's a link there to the process I'm going to describe to you of how Ryan and I came up with the cover for this book. So let me tell you just a little bit about working with Ryan, because he's so much fun to work with. He's, first of all, I want to tell you that Ryan has not, to my knowledge, read any of these books, and he's made the covers for all of them. So I think one of the most amazing skills that Ryan has, he does branding, is that he's able to understand a concept very, very quickly, and then come up with ideas for translating that concept into a visual representation, and then working with you, whoever you might be, in working out the fine details, whether it's a logo design for your business or a book cover. And he's just a lot of fun to work with. But it's just an amazing skill to be able to take that abstract idea and create a visual representation. I really like that. And when we did the first book, the used version, I said, you know, we're going to work hard on this because we want to set up covers that are recognizable for a series that didn't even exist yet. We were just starting with the very very first book, but we got the concept of the series in that first cover and carried it through to the other covers. So I just highly recommend Ryan as someone who's able to translate your concept, whatever it is, book, business, film. He also does films, that you really check out Reformation Designs. His name is Ryan J. Rhodes, and the business is Reformation Designs. And he's just awesome. It's just totally awesome. And so anyway, thanks for being here, Ryan. And thanks for the congrats on the launch. It's kind of nerve-wracking. It's like, will this happen? Won't it happen? Will it happen? Won't it happen? I don't know. It's really quite amazing. It's a process, just like everything else. So the way that I have worked with Ryan is that we do a video conference, and he shares his screen, and he shows me his ideas, and then we haggle over, you know, maybe if it went over here, or if it went over there, or if it was green instead of red, or whatever concept we're working on at the time. And so what happens for you working with Ryan is that you experience the process as it is happening. That is just, it's just, you know, he doesn't just go away and sit in the corner and do stuff and go, okay, here it is. It's really a collaborative process, and I think it's one of the reasons that not just me, but all of his clients are happy with the work that he does, because he brings you into the process, and as the graphic design is created, you're right there. So if there's something that bothers you, or there's some little tiny detail on a book cover, for instance, that you want that bothers your eye for some reason, voila, it disappears right before your eyes. It's gone. Ryan's just amazing. And David had a great comment about the candles. Wander around any museum, you see zillions and zillions of lamps. Yes, you do. And so David, thanks once again for being here. I'm really happy that you're here. Okay, so what's happening? I don't know, Jeff, did I answer all your questions about Kickstarter and the process? It's I think before you start, you need to be very focused on the specific of the thing that you want to raise funds for. And two, that like any successful project in my book, that you have a budget, that you know exactly the amount of money that you want and exactly how that money is going to be spent. So you have a very, very clear idea of the financial goals and the actual um, pieces of the project that are included in the funding goal. For instance, independent authors like me um, have to do a lot of marketing, and marketing and advertising, it costs money. And but it was recommended that we not put any marketing money in our Kickstarter project. And so I listened and I did not include any money for advertising and marketing in the specifics of the Kickstarter project. So I think that's one of the things you have to think about when you're putting together a Kickstarter project, is the things that are going to be in the project and the things that you still have to do, but they're not part of the Kickstarter project itself. So you need the big picture of what it is you're trying to accomplish, and then the parameters of your Kickstarter project itself. And then you need to do all the prettifying, which is not one of my great skills. One of the reasons I have Ryan do the book covers. So you need to come up with, headers. You need to come up with, um, well, Jeff, that is a really good question. His question is, why not include advertising and marketing? I think there's two reasons, as I remember. One is it's nebulous and it's hard for backers to understand. And two, publishing projects on Kickstarter have a hard time raising funds. It's one of the hardest projects to fund on Kickstarter. And so the theory behind it is, this is my understanding, the theory behind it is that you focus on actually getting the book out and getting the books to the backers, and using the money in the Kickstarter campaign for that. You would probably have to talk to somebody at Kickstarter about that. Now, if you're doing a non-book project and advertising is part of the overall budget for a project for your widget or whatever it is, it might be totally acceptable. You do have to, it's kind of like doing a mini grant proposal. I think that's the easiest way to explain it. When you're asking people for money, you need to tell them exactly where that money is going to go. So if you were asking for advertising for your widget, for example, you would need to specify that you were going to be advertising through these vehicles, and that vehicle A is going to be X amount of dollars, vehicle B is Y amount of dollars, and vehicle C is W amount of dollars. But the reason that you're asking for advertising money is you believe that these are the perfect vehicles for getting the word out about your widget. Does that make sense? That's my understanding of their concerns about advertising and marketing money. I think that question is probably better answered by someone at Kickstarter than by me. So anyway, that is a good question, because advertising and marketing are part of being in business. They just are. It's a reality of life. Okay. So any other questions? I'm just so thrilled that people are here and asking questions and sending good wishes and all those sorts of things. Let's see what I have here in the this slideshow. You know, Kickstarter has specific parameters. Let me see if I can share my screen again. I hope you don't mind that I'm doing the non-full tilt boogie presenter mode, but it's just too complicated with okay, Infinity Hall. And I think one of the things that makes Kickstarter a little different is the project lasts a certain amount of time. I see my little typo here. That Kickstarter is a crowdfunding project that is based on a lot of parameters, and I can really understand that. In that way, it does make it like a mini grant proposal, in that those parameters keep it real. The money that you ask for is a certain amount, and there's a reason that you ask for that certain amount of money, and you explain why why it costs as much as it does and where those dollars are going. So also, you know, I had someone the other day, let's just talk about this and generically for a minute. Signing up with Kickstarter. When you go to the Kickstarter page, Kickstarter asks, if you haven't been to Kickstarter before, Kickstarter asks you to set up an account and sign up. So even when you're at the Kickstarter page for the grain merchant, you're still going through Kickstarter. I have no idea what your password is, right? I just want to make that clear. You're not giving your personal information to me. When you sign in to my project or any other project, you are signing in to Kickstarter. So I just wanted to make that clear, because somebody sent me an email the other day being nervous about passwords. So I wanted to make it really clear that you are not giving me, Zara, any personal information. And if you're still kind of password nervous, you can also sign in through Facebook. So I just wanted to let you know that it's Kickstarter based, not Zara based. Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about what goes on in the grain merchant, because we have several themes in the grain merchant, and one of them is town politics. I don't know if any of you have ever been involved in town politics, but it was the same in 512 AD, CE, however you label it, and as it is now. It's rife with people jockeying for power and position, and so when Argolicus moves into town, right away he gets invited to the town council meeting, which just happens to be the next day. And one of the things that was happening at this time was that most of the people, these are called the Curials, and being a Curia member is one of the backer levels. Excuse me, is one of the backer levels at Kickstarter. One of the is that a lot of people didn't show up. There were lots and lots and lots of empty seats, like this one here. There were lots and lots of empty seats because people like staying in their villas out of town and they didn't see a reason to come into town and deal with politics. So let's take a look a little bit about how the social strata was set up in southern Italy at that time. There were a lot of people without land or employment, and depending on the conditions of the time and whether it was summer or winter, those people could be without work and without visible means of support. Then there were people who worked for other people as servants or overseers, things like that. Um, and then there were small farmers and growers who didn't have a lot of money. In the book, The Peach Widow, Argolicus goes to visit a family that are small farmers, and they have a pretty hard life. I don't know if any of you have been involved in farming, but it's work. It's work. And then there are the landowners. Those are the curia. Those are all the people who had the right to come and vote at the local, regional, what we would call town meetings. And then the major landholders, the principals, were the super rich. They had huge estates. They had many slaves to work the vineyards, the fields, the orchards, the livestock, and they made their money by selling all these goods, because this area was really a breadbasket for the rest of Italy, so that things were grown in Italy rather than being imported from, say, North Africa or other places where food and goods came in. Okay, and then the magistrates were elected by the curia for a period of 1 year, and they were, for that time, the legal authority of what happened and what went on in the town. And the magistrates sat on this little raised dais and conducted the meetings and listened to speeches and pleas or whatever it was from members of the curia who stood in front and stated their case. So, if you've ever been to a city council meeting, it's similar in some ways, at least the way it's structured physically. But you don't have to be a landowner in order to be involved. So a little bit different. So once again, since this is the next slide, I just want to thank everybody for being here, because it really means a lot to me. The grain merchant is, I'm really excited about this. I was talking about this a little bit earlier with Rin. The Grain Merchant is a full-length novel. It's going to be about 80,000 words, and there's several themes that go on. And one of the things I like about writing a full-length novel is that you get to tackle different themes within the story. As a story creator, it's kind of fun to weave these threads into the story and then have the main protagonist, in this case Argolicus, see how all those different threads connect. So he's immediately plunged into the world of politics. And at the same time, here it is August, and even though the harvests were good, there's a food shortage. And then the other theme is his mom and this woman's mom have kind of arranged that he should meet this woman, and it doesn't quite turn out the way the moms thought it would turn out. So, okay, we stopped sharing. And did I stop sharing? Oh gosh, people. Yes, I stopped sharing. I'm sorry. I'm on YouTube, but this is actually being, what's the word? Broadcast through YouTube. I mean through Hangout. So I have to go to the Hangout site. I have to go to the Hangout site to actually manage what's going on, like screen sharing. David, yes, the books take place during the time of Theodoric, and they take place in 512, the year 512. So Theodoric has been king for quite some time. He's actually in his 60s at this time. He's been there quite a while. So the kingdom is actually quite established, and things run according to Theodoric's will. Just to be clear, these are murder mysteries. They just happen to be set in this time period. I think it's a fascinating time to write about and to include details and have the characters move around in this really kind of bifurcated society where there are Romans, they call themselves Romans, but what we would call Italians, because they were Italian citizens, and there were the Ostrogoths. And one of the things that happens in these stories, because they are set in southern Italy, there really aren't a lot of Ostrogoths around. Unlike, say, up in near Ravenna in northern Italy, most of the Ostrogoths, they all received land when Theodoric conquered Italy. They received what were called thirds. And from what I've read, scholars are at issue. Oh, what a surprise. Scholars at issue. But, hi, Tidy. That whether the thirds were actual physical land or whether they were tax apportions, so that the local taxes that were collected, a third of them went to the Ostrogoths. So their scholars go either way or both. Not an issue that I have tackled so far in any of the books where I have to take a stand on something. And I do have to say that writing fiction gives you a lot more leeway than writing history per se, in that history, you're going to spend a lot of time defending your position, you know, and you've got footnotes and so said this and so said that, and you know, this is the kind of stuff I read to get the background. But in fiction, if there is a debate about something, as a fiction writer, you can pick your side of the debate and just say, for the context of my story, this is true, and go with it as long as you keep it true. So yes, the stories take place under Ostrogoth rule in Italy, and actually in the Argolicus Mysteries, Argolicus has a friend who is in some way related. They've never quite figured out or bothered to figure out how exactly it is they are related. Has a friend who is an Ostrogoth who lives in southern Italy. So he's a very unusual person. His name is Ebermuth. So Argolicus was a real person. I have pretty much made up, fictionalized, whatever you want to call it, his actual time in southern Italy. Most of the things that where he is mentioned in the Varii take place when he is in Rome. But I had him decide to retire and go back to his home in southern Italy because he was pretty much out of place in Rome. I mean, he functioned well as a magistrate, but he was uncomfortable for two reasons. One, that people treated him as a parvenu, and two, that he had this mixed heritage, which kind of put some people off. So that's all Zara's own fictional take on a real person. But Ebermuth, the Ostrogoth in the Argolicus stories, is a completely fictional character, as well, of course, as Argolicus' mom, who is also an Ostrogoth. We really don't know. All we know about Argolicus from Cassiodorus is that his dad was, you know, a noble in southern Italy, and even though Argolicus was coming from southern Italy, the people in the Senate should respect him, blah, 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 blah. So, but when these stories take place, all that has already happened. And Argolicus has decided to go back home to southern Italy, and these stories take place. But because of his reputation for wise decisions, people call on him for help. And I guess one of the things I haven't mentioned today is that murder was not a crime. I know it's hard for us with our Western civilization and everything to think that murder was not a crime, but it was a personal matter. And unless, actually, there were two ways where murder was a crime. One was if a Roman citizen killed another Roman citizen's slave, that was a crime. That was pretty much destruction of property. Okay. But the other was if the murder impacted the public good in some way. So, but otherwise, for what we think of, you know, murders and from, you know, power or greed or jealousy or whatever motivates people to kill other people, that wasn't a crime. The family had to deal with it in their own way. If a family was rich, they could sue the other individual if they could find out who it was. Okay, first they had to find out who it was. And so that's where Argolicus comes into these stories. He helps families determine who it was that killed the murder victim. So I think that's so one of the things that Argolicus has to do is not only find who the murder victim is, but somehow there needs to be some kind of resolution about what happens to the perpetrator of the crime, because it isn't like in our modern mysteries where, okay, we found out who done it, you know, and now they're packed off to jail, and they're going to go on trial, depending on what kind of mystery it is. But that wasn't the case in these times. So Argolicus has this responsibility to help families figure out what it is exactly they're going to do once the actual perpetrator is discovered. So that's a little twist on these stories, just because they happen to be set in this period of time. Okay. Okay, I don't see any other questions at this time. So if you have any questions, just post them here and um, on in the comment stream, and I'm happy to answer them. What else? What else can people want to know? Let me take a look at what I had stocked up here. Oh, you know what we can do? Sorry, guys, I'm going for an hour and a half here. Kind of. Whoa, my voice is getting scritchy scratchy. So, I don't know. I can read a little bit from The Grain Merchant. Okay, so this is from The Grain Merchant, and this is the very, very, very beginning. Argolicus opened the door of the big house to memories and 17 years of dust. He peered into the atrium in the early morning light, as if childhood never left, hoping to hear his father's voice. Dust motes floated above the stagnant impluvium, the pool in the middle of the atrium coated with green moss. No wonder his mother never came here. The house was full of his father, in spite of the dust and years. Workmen marched past him into the room in a group, and the other rooms, leaving Argolicus alone in the room. The early August sun coming through the roof seemed to light up history. Argolicus' business conversations in his father's study and office, and somehow his mother's laughter echoed from another room. Those sounds were in his head. He pushed them away as he strode across the atrium toward the big study. Hold on. David has a question. David, you know what? The Code of Justinian came later. Actually, I have a whole section about Justinian, but Justinian came later, and Justinian kicked out the Ostrogoths, and it's one of the reasons it's so hard to find out about the Ostrogoths, because Justinian did everything in his power to eliminate all trace of the Ostrogoths, and destroying books, destroying all kinds of things, to the extent of redoing mosaics in Theodoric's chapel. Wasn't it just composed of the earlier codes? Justinian's code, yes, was composed of earlier codes. Don't ask me too much about Justinian, because I'm kind of have a broad overview of Justinian. But the codes that were in place were set in place by Theodoric, and there were actually two codes. So the codes for the Italians, the quote Romans, were the old Roman codes, and yep, believe it or not, murder, not a crime. All right, except for the two instances I mentioned a little while ago. And as far as the Ostrogoths went, murder was a thing that was paid for, and depending on, what a family thought, and someone's position or station within the community, the tribe, whatever you want to call it, there was a payment. It could be money, it could be livestock. It was a payment, but it wasn't, death penalty crime or anything like that, the way we think about it. It was transactional. Does that help? I hope that helps. Okay, let's go back. Go back to Argolicus in his old family home, but he hasn't been there for many years. And he's in his father's study. The big table, draped with a cloth, stood in the middle. It looked smaller than he remembered. Had it diminished with time, or was he seeing it as a man rather than a boy? Master, Nicholas, his boyhood tutor and lifelong companion, interrupted his thoughts. I'll prepare a room for you. Which one? The main bedroom. If I'm taking over my father's house, I might as well move in as the master. Nicholas nodded and went off toward the rear of the big town domus, calling to one of the workmen to follow him. Argolicus wandered through the house. Town. I'm in town. No more leisurely country villa life. It was time for him to act as a reasonable citizen and throw off the pretense of running a country estate. The rooms filled with dust as workers shook out cloths and dusted alcoves and shelves. The workers covered their faces with cloth to avoid breathing the dust. Argolicus decided to go outside, reacquaint himself with the town of Scolace, just miles from his country villa estate. Now that the family townhouse was open and people were working, he wasn't needed. When he stepped out of the vestibule into the street, the summer sun blinded him. He took a few moments to let his eyes adjust. When he blinked, a man in magisterial robes, all silk, stood in front of him, medium height, but with a carriage that implied importance. He met Argolicus blinking with unreadable eyes. His perfume seemed to expand in the summer air. Sura, he said in a reasonable voice. Caius Larcius Sura. Surely you remember me. Sura. He remembered a gawky, petulant adolescence filled with pretension and ready to latch on to anyone with a good name. Sura, I do remember you. It's been years. You look well. His eyes took in the fleshed-out face with a hint of jowls, squinting eyes that hinted at poor vision, and wrinkles beside his mouth that would soon turn into permanent scowl lines. The man looked 10 years older than his early 30s. Elected magistrate and chosen civil curator of Scolace just this year. Keeping the town in peace, at least I try. He glanced at the street, where streams of people were filling the street, headed in the direction of the harbor. Lately, we've had this problem, he nodded toward the people in the street. We're having a council meeting tomorrow. You should come. You've been up in the hills too long. It's time you joined me. It's time you joined us. There was no excuse for it. Argolicus had made a decision to enter town life, and here it was, an opportunity open to him on the very first day. One of the marching men in the street shouted, "What about us?" I'll be there, Argolicus said. You can all fill me in on the unrest. I see the people are agitated. It's about the grain harvest. What about it? It was a good year, no rain. He thought of his own. Ended just 2 weeks ago. The crop had been excellent. You're right about the harvest, but most of it is going north to Rome and Ravenna. The estate owners and the grain merchants made money. The poor people made none. And since the grain is leaving, there isn't enough for the people who don't own land. Not that it would make a difference. They have no money, so they can't afford bread, even if there were plenty of grain here. When is the meeting? I'll be there. At the normal hour. It's good to see you back in town. I hear you went to Rome. Argolicus nodded his head. And served as Prefectus Urbis? Argolicus nodded again, this time a bit irked. If Sura already knew, why was he asking? Then he understood. An appointed magistrate of Rome was a much more powerful title than the elected magistrate of Scolace. Yes, it's true, but I retired to come back here. This is my home. Ah, it's beautiful here, sir, waved his hand toward the ocean and then up toward the mountains. People still remember your father, a wise man. We need men like that. Then, as if he were late for an appointment, he said, well, I'm off. Good to see you back. I look forward to seeing you at the council meeting. He headed up the street in the swirl of silk and perfume. Okay, that's a little taste of the beginning. And it just gets more complicated from then on. Let's see what's going on. Oh my gosh. So I am running out of theme. Let me see what I have here. And oh, I know. I can share the I can share a little bit more about the town structure if I can. I mean the gosh, guys, I'm sorry I'm taking so long. I had so many slides, and I know that I thought I had a slide about Theodoric's structure, and I'm not seeing it. So I can talk about that for a little minute, though, and that is that because there were two rules of law, there were two sets of rules, and there were two sets of organizational hierarchy, I guess you could call it, that managed all those codes. So there were the Italian, Roman, civil codes, which we just talked about a minute ago, were inherited from the old Roman codes, which were a gigantic mishmash. David mentioned the Justinian codes and what those codes do later than when these stories take place. Those codes organize this incredible mishmash of laws that had been written for centuries for Roman rule. And then there was the Ostrogoth code, which applied only to the Ostrogoths, and that was the tribal code, the community code, probably the closest that you could find that was similar would be something like the saga of Burnt Njal in the Icelandic saga and the Althing, and Njal is what we would think of it as an attorney. He actually argues, presents and argues cases for other people. That's probably the closest example I could think of that you could actually go read about somewhere. And actually, it's a really great story. It's a fantastic story. The saga of Burnt Njal. It's an Icelandic saga. But that's kind of the closest you could get to. It was all tribal. Everybody knew everything. Everybody met. Everybody knew the circumstances of any case, and everything was presented and argued publicly. So that's kind of a super simplistic version of what all. Now, part of the problem, because now this tribal community has expanded to this larger physical geographic space, which is all of Italy, and as you see saw in the map, it's the Balkans as well. So there's Theodoric was ruling quite an extensive geographic location. and the rules for the Ostrogoths pervaded throughout all those areas. And of course, the final resource was the tribal leader, the king himself, Theodoric. And each of those codes had administrators and palace people and administrators and um, legal titles and people who administrated outlying areas like the governor, the Roman governor, and the Ostrogoth Sale. So there were equivalent rules, but they were separate. They didn't really cross over much. So it was intricate but separate, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Let's see if we have any more questions. I'm back here. Oh, look, Gina's here. Hi, Gina. Hi. Oh, hi. Great to see you here. So I've been talking about the Kickstarter project and talking a little about the grain merchant itself. And we have a visitor here today who doesn't read mysteries, but he's very interested in the Ostrogoth culture in Italy at that time. Well, it was a short period of time, so it was that time, I guess you could say. And Gina, do you have any questions? I'm open to questions. It's great to see you here. Thank you so much for being here. I love the moral support. Man, my voice is getting tired. I've been talking for what, hour and 42 minutes or something. This is like teaching a seminar. It's a long session. Okay, so the Ostrogoths, I can talk a little bit more about Ebermuth. He's one of my favorite characters. He's been in, I think he's been in every one of the stories so far. And he's kind of the opposite of Argolicus, who is this, reader, book collector, loves books, likes to think about things, and, makes considered decisions. And Ebermuth is this like man of action. It's like, do it now. Okay, you need this, I'm going. You need that, I'll go. At the end of The Used Virgin, he says, oh gosh, Adeodatus has to go away for 6 months. No problem. I'm going to take him. I've got business I've got to do. I'll take him. He'll be taken care of because Adeodatus is an old man. So he's one of my favorite characters. And in The Grain Merchant, there's 2 more characters who are Ostrogoth. Because there's an uprising related to the grain shortage and the bread shortage, things get kind of unruly. I don't know if you've ever been in a town where people were agitated and they were rioting, but it's very unsettling. And it's and so Ebermuth says, he says to Argolicus, essentially, you're crazy. You're out here in the streets wandering around and all these mobs of people, and they're all ready to explode. You need bodyguards. And Argolicus says, man, I don't need any bodyguards. That's ridiculous. And he says, nope, I'm sending them to you. And so these 2 bodyguards show up, and one is a fiery redhead, and the other is this big, they're both big guys, but the other one is the strong silent type. He doesn't talk so much, but the redhead Eberic is just like, boom, it's like Mr. Action. He's like Ebermuth multiplied as far as action goes. So I'm really having fun with these characters. As I mentioned very early at the beginning, one of the things I like about writing a full-length novel is is that I am able to go a little deeper into the characters, into the society, into what was going on at that time, and and have fun with it and carry out the themes. Um, and then of course, another one of the themes is that Argolicus, his mom has set him up for this possible arranged marriage, and he meets this girl, and actually I can read you a little bit of that because I kind of had fun with this. Let me find it here. You have to realize that this is unedited, and so there's little glumpy places and things like that. That's why I'm so looking forward to Marcus Trower helping me even out everything. He's such a skilled editor. All right, so Argolicus shifted on the bench in the entertainment room of the Vouse town residence. His mother's choice for a new wife sat across from him. Her name was Proba, the daughter of a wealthy grain merchant. She was small and delicate, with brown eyes framed above by graceful eyebrows, and she was the daughter of Quintinus. Her father, Pompeius Severus Quintinus, was obviously well off. Multicolored rich mosaics covered the floor in intricate weaving strands of leaves and geometric patterns, and the bright frescoes on the walls were themed with musicians playing harps, flutes, and drums. The slaves moved easily around the room, bringing various tasty snacks. A plate with thin bread rounds and a bowl of apricots and honeyed herb sauce sat on the table by the side of his bench. Proba Pompeius broke off a tiny piece of bread, dipped it in the apricot sauce by her side, and chewed silently. The silence was the cause of Argolicus' shifting. His mother had spoken to Proba's mother about a possible marriage match. The two of them now sat opposite each other without a word to say. Each time Argolicus asked her a question, she answered with a polite yes or no, and let the question drop into the pervading silence. It wasn't that she wasn't good looking. The light green tunic with embroidered strips down the front. Excuse me. Oh, talkie. With embroidered sleeves revealed a shapely form. Oh boy. Talking. The idea of spending days, the rest of his life, with someone with nothing to say dismayed him. What was the point? Proba broke the silence. I'm going to be honest. Here we are, sitting together in a moment arranged by other people. The purpose is marriage. I'm comfortable. My mother, unhappy as she is, thinks I would be happier married. I'm not unhappy. Argolicus felt his body relax. Not only was she not trying to trap him into a marriage he didn't want, she was not interested in marriage. I'm not unhappy either, he said. My mother was very happy in her marriage and wants the same for me. My father died 17 years ago. She does not want to marry again, and we're both old enough to know what we like in life. Can we agree that this marriage idea for the two of us is not a good one? Her composed face lit up with a smile, and her eyes glowed with warmth. She broke her silence with a stream of chatter, and all those people in the street flowed into the importance of guarding wealth, and that changed into the responsibilities of principals toward the general populace. Argolicus burst out laughing. She stopped and frowned. No, no, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at myself, he said. I agree with your ideas. It's just that minutes ago, I was wondering how we could have a conversation about anything. So was I, Proba said, smiling. Look how just the idea of marriage kept us from talking. Now that you've heard my grandiose ideas on the role of the principal in civic life, tell me about you. How do you spend your time? I don't know how to answer that. My life is changing. Just yesterday, I left our villa in the hills to move into town. I went to the town council meeting this morning. I don't know what my routine is yet. I do have one thing I do every day. Oh, what's that? Robert tilted her head and raised her delicate eyebrows into arcs. I read. I have a book collection and spend time reading each morning before I begin the rest of the day. Then in the evening, I read out loud, often in Greek, to practice. Argolicus shifted again, leaning forward. My slave has been with me since I was a child. He was my tutor, and now supports my daily activities. Oh, I had a tutor when I was young. He's long gone to another family. I don't read much. I prefer numbers. I like numbers. They give you answers. Answers? I never thought about mathematics that way. What do you mean, answers? Proba's eyebrows lifted, this time in surprise. It's simple. They add up. Sums give you information. Then you take action on the information. That's why I love working with my father. We check the numbers and then make decisions. Well, here was a way of approaching numbers different than the squint-eyed Donicus. Proba found them useful, while Donicus just kept track. What kind of decisions? I'm used to people like Donicus who keep track and make reports of totals, Argolicus asked. His evaluation of this slight girl was changing. Donicus, Proba said. He keeps columns. Argolicus smiled. Indeed, I saw his lists this morning. Well, father makes arrangements over all Italy, and with the grain trade, he has to make predictions. Then he bases his offers on the predictions he makes. It's quite simple, really. How much grain was harvested this year? Compare that to how much grain last year. Who were the biggest buyers last year? Then match them up. It would make my head swim. I thought it was a matter of knowing the right people. Proba smiled. That too, it takes years. That's my father's special skill. I do the numbers. He manages the people. You do the numbers? Yes. What do you think I was talking about? Argolicus dropped his eyelids and nodded. He had underestimated Proba. It was as if he had opened a spigot to a woman he didn't understand and outflowed someone completely different than his first perception. Her mind worked in a way opposite to his. He had thought he had a grasp of logic and reading people, but she lived in a different world. Okay, so that's Argolicus and Proba meeting for the very first time, and things get much more complicated from there on. And I don't know, when I was first in a little bit about creating characters. So when I first envisioned Proba, the easiest way I could kind of get a grasp of her was to think about, our modern day geek girls. They love what they do. They're really into their geekiness and they love it. And they aren't girly girls. And I thought, well, that's kind of who Proba is. She's a woman who really likes playing with numbers and fiddling with things and making numbers do things. And this was at a time when that wasn't really a role of a quote Roman woman. It was often the role of a slave to do that. Somebody who was mathematically inclined and kept numbers and kept track of things, and so that's kind of how I envisioned her, um, and I don't know if you have any friends who are geek girls, but they're kind of a lot of fun, and so I wanted to get Argolicus to open up to who she is and try to get a grasp of this world that's really not part of his regular thinking mode. So I'm having having fun with the two of two of them. So I think we talked about the arranged marriage, and we've talked about the Ostrogoths, and we took a little into the civic structure. So I'm really open to any more questions that you may have about the grain merchant or the writing process or Kickstarter. If you still have any questions about Kickstarter and how it works, you take a look at my slides and see what other goodies I have. Okay, let's talk about Kickstarter just a little bit more. I need to share my screen, which means I need to find, here it is. I feel like a one-man band here. Screen share and share. The Hall of Infinity. Here we go. So the grain merchant. So let's talk a little bit about how this works on Kickstarter. So this is a long process. The grain merchant is coming out in the summer of 2019 to the backers, the Kickstarter backers. So you are going to be the first to read this story because it's not going to be released to the public until probably about November of 2019. So this is like the preview version for Kickstarter backers. And just a little bit more about this story. Set in the thriving town of Squillace, Argolicus and his tutor Nicholas open the old home and discover that life in town is filled with politics, uprising, Roman and Ostrogoth tension, and a beautiful heiress. And then there's murder. So I'm really excited that everybody is here today. And let's talk a little bit about how the rewards work in Kickstarter. There's a number of levels of rewards, and so you can pretty much just pick your comfort level, and I base the titles of the reward levels just related to the story. The grower as a backer at $5, you're going to receive the digital ebook version of the book. And as a curial, you're going to receive the digital version of the book and 3 of the previous Argolicus Mysteries, as well as a very special book that I'm putting together for the backers of this project because it can't happen without you. So I decided it needed something really special. So there's a cookbook too. It's called The Principles Table, and it's recipes from 6th century Italy. So I thought that would be a fun special reward. Now the merchant reward is everything that I just mentioned, the ebook of version of the grain merchant, the principles table, backers only cookbook, and 3 of the Argolicus Mysteries, plus a paperback copy of the grain merchant. And then for the principal rewards at $40, there's 2 copies of the paperback plus a digital copy plus the principles table plus all 4 of the previous Argolicus Mysteries. And then, whoops, here we go. And then one more, and the magistrate level, and these are pretty special. You can choose to be a character in the next Argolicus Mystery, and I'll be talking with those people, the civil magistrates. That's limited to 10 people, about the role they would like to have in this story, and about translating your current name into your Roman, Ostrogoth, Syrian, or whatever it turns out to be for your character in the story. And of course, we'll be acknowledging them in their real name, unless you want to be anonymous. Anyway, so at the civil magistrate level for $100, you get all the previous rewards, plus you're going to be a character in the next Argolicus Mystery. Or you can be a commerce magistrate and be a guest on my YouTube video show, The Mystery Fix, and we can talk about mysteries or anything else you want to talk about. So either way, those are the rewards. And I just want to mention again that those rewards come out next summer, because it takes that long to go back and forth with the editing and to get the books formatted and then off to the printer and get the books actually produced, and then for you, the backers, to get them shipped to you. So it's a long process from now at the beginning of January till probably sometime the beginning of August when the books come out. And then here's a little bit more about the backer only cookbook. Some of the recipes I have in there right now are how to bake bread, tying it with a bow so it keeps its shape, how to make your own garum, which was the standard seasoning sauce, which was fermented fish. And there's a way to shortcut this without having fish fermenting in the open air in your backyard. How to make honeyed wine, which was a standard Roman drink. Super tasty fish stew, which appears in the grain merchant, and a tasty lamb roast. And then gustum, those things, those little appetizer things that slaves are coming around and dishing out to people when they're meeting. I'm going to have several of those kind of appetizers of the time. So this will be available only to backers of the Grain Merchant Kickstarter program. I want to make that really clear. It's not coming out later. The Grain Merchant will be coming out to the public, but the principles table is going to be for backers only. You will be the only ones exclusive to Kickstarter backers. So super thank you, super thank you, super thank you. I think I'm getting punch drunk. Okay, let's see. Let's stop sharing. And haha, Jeff, I love this question. How do you know geek girls were real then? What was life like for women then? Whoa, that's kind of a generic question. That's kind of like saying what is life like for women now? And yeah, you can take your pick, your stance, and your attitude depending on whether you're a man or a woman and what your personal goals are. But okay, so let's talk a little bit about that's actually kind of a good question for Argolicus Mysteries because we've got two cultures. Roman women were expected to get married, and they were often married in arranged marriages for political reasons, financial reasons, power, family alliances, whatever. However, once they were in a marriage, depending on their husband's attitude, they had a lot of leeway. Um, However, in this story, it's very unusual for a girl to not want to get married at all because that creates stability for her. It creates her position in society, and it was also very unusual. Whereas Roman women might have business dealings, they might buy and sell things. That wasn't a traditional role for a Roman/Italian woman, and that the men were actually the leaders of the household. The men were the leaders of the household, and they were the ultimate authority. It was a little bit different for Ostrogoth women, like Argolicus' mom, in that they were considered equal to men, and they were much more outspoken and free to act and do as their desires go. Okay, you know, these are such broad strokes, Jeff, but that's a really good question. So it was very unusual for an Italian/Roman girl to be all wrapped up in business and managing numbers. Does that help answer your questions? And how do I know geek girls were real then? I don't have to know. That is the beauty of being a fiction writer. I don't know how else to say that. It's the beauty of being a fiction writer that you can create a unique character who somewhat fits the mold, but who is, let's say, out of character for her time. But we have to realize that if she is out of character for her time, she has to deal with that in her current situation. Okay? So, in my lifetime, let's talk about geek girls for a minute. In my lifetime, when I was in high school, I was counseled out of being a biologist because girls didn't do that. That is exactly what my counselor told me. So it depends on our cultural structure of how we perceive women. Does that make any sense, Jeff, whatsoever? Jeff asks great questions. But were there geek girls then? I'm sure there were. And I'm sure there were women who had those skills who used them in a way but didn't proclaim them. I think what is unusual about Proba is she is actually proclaiming that that is what she likes and that is what she wants to do. And she has no interest in the, quote, womanly duties of marriage. Yeah, does that clarify it? That was a good question. I'm going to have to think about that and think about how to enlarge on that in the story, because I think that's a good question. You know, we don't want to put a 21st century girl in the 6th century. I really want to avoid that. So, because I know that's one of the problems people have with historical novels that don't ring true, is characters who seem like they're out of time. So that's a really good question. I'm going to have to think about that more. Thank you, Jeff. Um, let's see. I don't see. I don't see any more questions. Okay. I'm looking at this. This is really interesting. I'm looking in the comments. Jean has a check mark by her name. But no one else has a check mark. Gina, if you're still here, what makes you so special that you have a YouTube check mark? I'm curious. I guess it's kind of like being verified on Google, maybe? I don't know. That's a YouTube thing. I don't know what that means. Okay, any more questions about Kickstarter, writing, creating characters? I love Jeff's question about the Geek Girl. Writing historical, how do I pick, which components of my history knowledge I'm actually going to use in the story? Any question, I don't care. If I don't know the answer, I'll tell you straight off, I don't know the answer. So I'm not afraid to do that. This is how we learn. I do want to tell you something about today, though. Whenever you start a new project, there's a lot of, well, at least for me, there's a lot of apprehension and, I don't know if I call it anxiety per se, but at least, like there's this feeling of, oh my gosh, what am I doing? What am I doing? And so because Kickstarter is timed, and this project has 30 days from start to finish, and I knew that I was going to be doing the launch party today, I stayed up until midnight last night to make sure that I could launch the Kickstarter party. It doesn't launch until I push the magic launch button, right? So I could push the magic launch button, and then one of the requirements for Kickstarter is that you have a list of frequently asked questions. There don't have to be a lot of them, but you need them. And I had pre-written those, but you can't stick them in there till the project is launched. So midnight, I'm pushing the launch button, and then I'm putting in my frequently asked questions and doing that. And I was like, okay, phew, that's done. I can go to bed now. And I woke up this morning and it's like, oh man, I don't know, lunch parties today, and I don't know if this is, what was I thinking, all that stuff. And I looked and I had 2 backers, and I was just like, I haven't done anything. I can't believe this is happening. And before we started the lunch party, I had a number of backers, and I want to tell you that I am so grateful. I'm just so excited and grateful that people are enjoying these books, that people are enjoying these books, and are willing to back a project for another one. Jeff, are you going to discuss the novel further on your YouTube show? My YouTube show, The Mystery Fix, is tangentially is the quick answer, Jeff, because that show is really for mystery writers who are with hints and tips about approaching writing a mystery, the structure, the victim, the the clues, the evidence, how the sleuth, detective, whatever you want to call your protagonist, how they work, how they put together the pieces, how you hide the pieces in the story, and how you bring your mystery to a conclusion without boring your readers. So the quick answer to that is no. I'm not going to do a specific mystery fic show about the grain merchant, because it's just a different deal. Um, I talk about my writing process and what's going on more on my Facebook author page on Facebook. So it's Zara Altair author. If you want to find out more about things like that, that would be the best place to connect. My website, also zaraaltair.com, lists all the books, and but it doesn't go really in depth into the novel. So, what question would you have about the novel right now? That's a good question. Anyway, thanks. Because remember, being a guest on the Mystery Fix Show is one of the rewards for the magistrates. People, I am getting tired of talking. But I'm going to tell you, I had no idea I could do this. I've been talking for over 2 hours now. And I'm getting these fabulous questions for people who are stopping in and saying hello. And want to thank you for that. You know, I talked earlier about Ryan Rhodes, because he was here visiting for a while, and he is the graphic designer who created the cover for the Grain Merchant and for all the other. Just take a look at the cover one more time, and for all the other Argolicus Mysteries. But let's talk a little bit about editing, because actually backing the Kickstarter project, the biggest portion of the funds of the Kickstarter project is going to editing. And the editor is Marcus Trower. And Marcus, I love his byline, tagline, commas, characters, and crime scenes. And what did I know when I read that byline? It was like, well, one, he likes my genre, and two, he has a sense of humor. Okay, we're off to a really good start. And he has 25 years of writing and editing experience. He specializes in mysteries, thrillers, and I think there's a genre of science fiction, but I don't remember what it is because I'm not writing in that genre. Anyway, Marcus, we've had several emails back and forth, and he's taken a look at a couple of chapters from The Grain Merchant, and he's excited about the project. Well, guess what? As a writer, it's really wonderful to work with an editor who's excited about your project, because then things click. So we create a style sheet, and a style sheet is just a list of the things that are going to be consistent throughout the novel. And it can be the spelling of all character names, and that's kind of important in a historical novel like this, where people have what today would be called unusual names, but might have been common in the time. And a style sheet also is like, do you use the Oxford comma or not? So as your editor goes through, then they're checking for details like that. Is the character's name always spelled consistently? They always do they always use an Oxford comma in a sequence of things? And you see, Marcus does not use the Oxford comma, whereas I do. All right, so that's something we're going to knock out in this style sheet. So I think a lot of people think of editing as you know, the commas and the semicolons and oops, you missed a quotation mark here and that sort of thing. And that is one part of editing, and it's a very detailed part of editing. But Marcus goes deeper than that. He really looks at the story, where how the story works and where there are any inconsistencies. He also looks at syntax and how the sentences flow and how the paragraphs flow, how the paragraphs go together, which means how the scenes go together, how the chapters go together, blah, 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 blah. And finally, there's punctuation and grammar. So the grain merchant actually goes to twice to Marcus. That's why if you're kind of going, whoa, all that for, you know, editing a book, well, yeah, okay, because he goes through it twice. The first time we're looking at story details and syntax and paragraphs and scenes and any plot holes. I hope there won't be, but you never know. And the flow of the general overall flow of the story, I guess you might say. And, you know, as he looks at punctuation and grammar, it's like, oops, you know, you need to fix this or do that and whatever. Okay, and then after he's done all that, he sends he sends all his recommendations, suggestions, whatever you want to call it. He sends those to me, and I rework things, however that may be. I may have to shorten a chapter, make a chapter longer, move it to a different place in the story, you know, his suggestions on how to make things flow better in the story. That first edit is all about flow. And then the second edit, so after I do all that and make all my changes based on his suggestions, then I send it back to him again, and we go through for all the detail stuff. So it's quite a process. It is quite a process. So I'm really thrilled I found him. I have people, you know, once you start, I'm going to stop sharing here now for a minute. Once you start putting books out there, people contact you and say, hey, I'm an editor, you know, hire me. And I don't know anything about them. I don't know. And the thing that's really interesting is they don't tell me, hey, I'm an editor and I specialize in mysteries, right? So they understand the genre and the tropes that are required, that readers want in a mystery. And they tell me what their rates are, but they don't tell me anything about their approach to editing. And one of the things I loved about Marcus, I found him on Reedsy, both in his introduction on Reedsy and on his website itself, was his approach and attitude, his approach to and his attitude about storytelling and editing and the process of how the two go together. So I am absolutely thrilled to have found Marcus, and I do have to say that that if this project doesn't get funded, oh my gosh, I hope it does. But if it doesn't, I'm still going to use Marcus. It's just going to take a lot longer for me to raise those funds to hire him. But he just is, his approach to the sample chapters that I sent, and his communication skills and everything, I've just found working with him really easy. Easy in the same way it is to work with Ryan in graphic design. It's just a process that flows, and I think that's so important for a successful book project. It's just very important. At least it is to me. It makes things a lot easier. Communication is clear, quick, and responsive, and it makes things go forward, which I think is just great. And how projects, whether on Kickstarter or anywhere else, how projects become successful. And so I would like to encourage you. This is a Kickstarter lunch party. I would like to encourage you to go to Kickstarter, and yeah, I guess I better share my screen again. Go to Kickstarter and back the project. And here's why I'm having a launch party. I mean, it is exciting. It's very exciting to have a Kickstarter project, but the real thing about project launching psychology, I guess you could call it, is that success builds success. So if you're interested in this project in any way, I'd really love for you to go and make your pledge, choose your backer level today. And the reason for that is that when other people come to the project, see, I haven't broadcast this out to the general public yet. That's why we're having a launch party. This is, people I know, friends and fans of Argolicus, people like that. The general public really isn't aware of it. Is that when people see that other people have backed a project on Kickstarter, they're like, oh, okay, looks like something that people are really interested in. So if you can make a pledge, you can always change your rewards later, because nothing happens till the end of the project. I need to remind you of that. Whatever your pledge level for backing the project, you won't be charged until the funding goal is met and at the end of the 30-day period, so February 6th. So if you could go now to the Kickstarter project at http://bit.ly/KS for Kickstarter, the grain merchant, and check out the rewards and choose your backer level, and then back the grain merchant. And there's also an open category if you don't want any rewards and you just like the idea of the project, you can back there as well, because every person who backs the project is actually sending out a message to other people to back the project as well. This is a worthwhile endeavor. This is something that that you're going to enjoy, and you're creating that interest and success. You're helping build the project by backing. So I'd like to encourage you to back today. Yeah, I know I sound like PBS pledge night, but that's kind of how it is. So I want to thank everybody who has pledged already, because that's very exciting. I'm totally thrilled. I don't even know how to explain it. I'm just totally thrilled that people are backing this project. It's like getting notes from my readers. Every time I get an email from a reader, it's just, it just makes everything feel worthwhile, because somebody has read the book, they like the book, they read more than one book, they like the characters, and it makes it feel like I'm really connecting with those readers, and that they're having as much fun with Argolicus Mysteries as I have creating them and writing them. That's I don't know, it's just really exciting. So backing today makes a difference in the success of the project. So I can't, it's actually, it's not just psychological, it's a statistical, um, it's a statistical reality that projects that get funded at the beginning have an 80% better success rate than projects that don't get funded at the beginning. So you can help kick off the Kickstarter by backing now. I do sound like PBS. Anyway, well, and of course, I'm really excited about this project. I have two great, fantastic people on the team, Ryan Rhodes from Reformation Designs and Marcus Trower. And I'm so looking forward to working with Marcus. This will be the first time that we've worked together, and I just love his attitude. Everything in our communication so far has just been so spot on, and eager to work. He's eager to work on this project. I am eager to work with him, and so you can make dreams come true. Really, it's really, you can make dreams come true by backing this project. So I want to thank you for being here, for being part of the launch, and for actually, you know, going and picking your backer level, because without you, it doesn't happen. That's just the way it goes. It is, it's the way it goes. Okay, so we've talked about the Ostrogoths, we've talked about Theodoric, we've talked about the Monophysites, the Arians, and the Trinitarians, and the intense religious fervor that was happening at that time over the natures of Christ. We've talked a little bit about the town structure and the social structure and how things worked. We haven't actually talked about the grain. I mentioned it in passing, but it's a major component of this story, is how the grain worked. If we go back to, let me share my screen again, and let's take a look at Theodoric. If I can find him here. Oh, we didn't talk about slavery. We can do that too. Here we go. I wanted to share this. So Theodoric was, I call him the super Roman Goth, because everything that he did, including his little imperial red shoes, which he wore, was based on the imperial court in Constantinople and how things went with the emperor. So he dressed in rich silks, he had his red imperial shoes, he had his scepter, and with the hawk of the people, the eagle of the people, and the bread. This, guys, is a loaf of bread. And it was up to the emperor, and in this case, the king, Theodoric, to supply bread. It was given. People expected to get bread from the king. Okay, and so he expected that bread would be distributed to everyone. So in Ravenna, there would be these great big huge carts filled with loaves of bread, and they would toss them out to the people, and everybody would get get their bread. Oh, so one more thing about the super Roman Goth before we got off into grain and bread. Um, so and in his room, his reception room, was this fancy throne, and he sat on a cushion, but underneath the cushion of the throne was a human skin. So yeah, kind of not what the Romans did, right? In the tradition of his people, this was a reminder that he had the final decision over people's lives. That's what the human skin represented. But I wanted to show you this image because of the bread, because the bread is part of the key to the story, and the grain merchant is that everybody expects bread. It's like you're right. Because you live in Italy, you expect to be supplied with bread. And what the problem is at the time of the story, and if you were here for the reading with the people marching by and they said, one guy shouts out, "What about us?" You know, is that in that particular area, even though the harvest was great, the weather was good, the harvest was good, there isn't enough grain to make bread for the people. So somebody goofed up. Somebody overcalculated, undercalculated. We don't know yet. It's part of the story. But somebody goofed up, and there isn't enough grain available in town to serve the local people because it all went somewhere else. And that is one of the key clues to this mystery, is what the heck happened to the grain? Because I just wanted to, people expected bread. It came from the king on down. And so it isn't just poor planning on somebody's part. It's like they're going again. It's a civil problem, because bread goes to everybody, and there's not enough grain to make bread for everybody. So it's a big problem. And Argolicus, in his town meeting, what time do we, I think I have time to read a little bit more from the story. I'm going to do that because Argolicus goes to the town meeting and all this stuff is happening. Let's see if I can find the right place to. Oh, did I not get that ready? Oh, I know what I did. I put it out of order, that's why. So let's jump into the town meeting for a while and show you what's going on here. Men grumbled on the benches. Several stood up to speak. Vespasianus turned his regal head from one side of the hall to the other. He held up his hand. Let Sextus Gabinius Pinnus continue. Bartholomeus frowned. The men at the benches sat down. Pinnus continued. Quintinus knows best where the grain comes from. He is in communication with the growers, the large estates, and the small farms. We'll need to wait for him to let us know if more grain is available. Bartholomeus interrupted. We can wait. Meanwhile, something must be done. If we can't appease the people, the hungrier they are, the more they will turn to disruption. I call on the principals to settle this matter as quickly as possible. All the men on the benches stood. Cries of now and stop them rang through the large hall. Some raised their fists in anger. Others ran toward Bartholomeus and stood next to him in front of the dais. On the dais, the principals began whispering questions and shaking their heads. Thoughts and questions ran through Argolicus' head. Was Bartholomeus doing this as a play to become a principal? He was richer than some of the men on the dais, like Pinnus, the wine merchant, but he was not from an established family. And although he had property, much of his wealth stemmed from his slave trade. In this crisis, in the council, he had never seen the citizens of Squillace. Whoops. My tidy. I lost my place. Here we go. He had never seen the citizens of Squillace so out of order. They were as disruptive as the people on the streets, just in a different way. It seemed as if the entire town was erupting in chaos. Vespasianus rose from his chair and raised his hands. As he turned his head to look out over the town membership, the men on the floor grew quiet. Those at the benches lowered their fists and hung their heads. One by one, the men around Bartholomeus returned to their places. Finally, Bartholomeus walked to take a place on a bench, and the principals on the dais. Vespasianus lowered his arms and said, Citizens, nothing will be solved without order. We can discuss our situation rationally and reach our conclusions. Grain distribution cannot be solved until we hear from Quintinus. Let us, for the moment, continue with the other issues of today's meeting. He turned around and motioned toward Donicus. Argolicus stood. I have an interim proposal. Donicus tugged at his tunic, waving his sheets of numbers in the other hand. Argolicus turned. In a minute, he said. Vespasianus frowned, sure that Argolicus wanted to prolong the discourse. Men on the dais looked on with shock. On the benches, men murmured and furrowed brows. Citizens, Argolicus continued, speaking to everyone in the hall, in the matter of the grain shortage, I will speak with Quintinus. I have an appointment at his home later today. I recently returned from Rome, where I settled disputes on a regular basis. Correct information is the basis of sound decisions. Let me gather facts from Quintinus, our grain merchant. I will report back to the magistrate Vespasianus. If we need to confer with other principals of Squillace, we can do that once I have the facts. Then we can set up a grain dispersal for the people. Once they know they have food, I am sure their fractious behavior will subside. The men on the benches settled back. Heads nodded. Everyone on the dais turned to Vespasianus. Bartholomeus frowned, but finally nodded in agreement. A reasonable solution, Vespasianus said. Once we calm the populace, we can return to regular town affairs and the prosperity of Squillace. We look forward to your answers, he nodded to Argolicus. Now let us turn to the matter of the tax levies. Argolicus listened with half a mind through the tax levies to screen over the warehouse improvements and Donicus' explanation of the markets. He was focused now on how to approach Quintinus about the lack of grain for the region, when his main purpose in being at the house was to meet Quintinus' daughter. His mother had arranged with the woman's mother for the two to meet. It wasn't quite an arranged marriage, since both of them were adults, but a maneuvering to unite two families. The wealthy grain merchant, without old Roman family ties, and the established principal family whose representation was Argolicus. Okay, so Argolicus volunteers. Oh, wait, so screen share. Argolicus volunteers to solve the problem. You realize that this is his first town meeting back in Squillace. This is like his second day in town, and he goes to the meeting and he says, okay, let's resolve this and get on with it. And so that's another thread through the beginning of the story is Argolicus in politics, Argolicus trying to figure out what's going on with the shortage of grain in the area, and all of that. Let me get this in here and get back to you on YouTube. I'm sorry this is so bifurcated. It's the way it is. So we're kind of heading toward the end of our time here. I think this is the longest I have ever been on air on YouTube, that's for sure. Used to do a radio program, but that was an hour. So this is it, my trial by speaking for 3 hours. So I want to thank everybody for being here. I thank for all the backers who have already come in and backed the project. I'm just flabbergasted. I'm so excited. This is only the first day, and people are jumping in and making pledges, and they're showing a real interest in getting the grain merchant out into the world. So I am totally thrilled. I'm just thrilled. And I want to also thank all the people who have been here today and have asked some really good questions. It was great. It really helped me to answer those questions. And I always like to see what people, what their questions are, because it helps me understand what their interests are and what things I should put in future stories and where people's interests lie. And I love Jeff's question about Geek Girls at the time, because it gives me some more fodder to put in on how to treat Proba in the story, because she is quite unusual in her culture. She's very unusual. Because she's rich, I think, is one of the reasons that she gets to have the freedom to be as unusual and unique as she is. And I think we've talked about most of the major characters. There are suspects that show up, but that's we're going to have to read the book to find out who they are. And And you're going to have to read the book to find out if Argolicus and Proba really hit it off. And actually, I haven't mentioned who's murdered. And so I think I'm going to leave that as a question too, because it's one of the keys that brings all the things together. And then I had one last thing. There is another thread. Oh my gosh, here I go with techno leaps. There is one other thread in the grain merchant, and that is slavery. So I thought we should probably talk about, you know, just as geek girls were unusual at this in this time, slavery was how things worked. So slaves were sold on the open market with bidding, um, just like the stock market. You know, people came, they bid, they offered prices, and the slave went to the highest bidder. This is kind of a romanticized image, but slaves actually wore signs on their fronts that stated what they did and what their skills were, what their special talents were. So somebody like Nicholas, who is Argolicus' tutor, who was his tutor when he was a child, but is his lifelong slave. And so he's his lifelong companion. So Nicholas is always along, adding his comments and adding his perspective to what's going on in the Argolicus Mysteries. He's a Greek. He has classical education, which he passes on to Argolicus, and he is a lifelong companion. And as I mentioned early on, that classical education includes fighting skills. So they practice with swords, even though Romans were not allowed to carry weapons under Ostrogoth rule. Romans could not carry weapons in public. They still practice with the weapons. And in the last story, the Vellum Scribe, everybody's fighting skills come alive when they are attacked in the meadow. Anyway, I'm getting off track, so I want to go back to slavery because it was a fundamental of life. It is how things got done. Slaves worked in the field, they worked in commerce, they worked in the household, and they actually they performed some very important tasks like secretarial and accounting tasks. That's what's so unusual about Proba, is that she is doing all that work with numbers instead of a slave who keeps track of all the numbers. So they did just about everything, and it's a tricky issue to approach when you're living in Western society in the 21st century, to write about a structure that was based on slavery, and that slaves are taken for granted. I know in this culture, in this small town, slaves are taken for granted. They make life go forward, and that the uprising isn't about the slaves, because the slaves are taken care of. The uprising is about the people who do not have land and do not have employment. So that's a little bit different. Um, so, any more questions? We have a few more minutes. Oh, gosh, we have 5 more minutes. So, if you have one last question, this is the time um, to ask that question, because we're going to be gone in 5 minutes, and I cannot believe I have been talking for 3 hours. I just, woo, wow. So, anyway, I hope for people who are here that it's been informative, and you can always get in touch with me if you need to know more about Kickstarter, how it works, if you want to know more about the grain merchant in particular, and always connect with me if you want to learn more about mystery writing and how that works. And because mysteries have special conditions, tropes as they call them, where that readers expect. And if you're missing those tropes, um, then your mystery is less likely to be successful. Whatever else you throw in, whether it's historical detail or urban fantasy or anything else, um, the the mystery tropes need to be there. So I try to work hard to make all that stuff happen, tell the story, create interesting characters, and have fun with the writing project itself. So, guys, this is it. This is it. This is it. I've been going for 3 hours, and I want to thank you so much for being here. Thank you for backing the project. I'm so excited about The Grain Merchant. Um, it's my first mystery full-length novel. I've ghostwritten some things for other people, but this is my own mystery full-length novel. So I'm very excited about that. I'm having fun exploring all the threads in the story, and fun with Argolicus. And hi, John. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. The Grain Merchant, I'm really having fun with it. Thank you for stopping by. I love the smiley face and the wink. And I really miss you guys. And got to get back to San Francisco and visit. So that's it, everyone. I think I'm going to end 3 minutes early unless a question pops up right now, because my throat has made it through 3 hours of talking. I'm really tired. So if you didn't back The Grain Merchant today, be sure to go to Kickstarter, look for The Grain Merchant Project, pick your backer level, and back the project, and you will be receiving The Grain Merchant in summer of 2019. Oh, whoa, we're going overtime. Woohoo! Because John Spangler has a question. John, the time period is early 6th century. There's a specific year. Actually, it's 512 AD CE, however you want to talk about it. And it's in southern Italy. If you like, you can, once this stops, you can go back and look, or you can actually go to the Kickstarter page and it'll tell you a little bit more about it. But anyway, it's Italy under Ostrogoth rule in the early 6th century with King Theodoric, and our main character, Argolicus, was Prefectus Urbis in Rome, but now he's back home in southern Italy and trying to figure out the rest of his life. But meanwhile, he gets involved in solving a murder. It's kind of the quick view of the story. So it's early 6th century Italy in under Ostrogoth rule. I think we need to understand that. And there's a lot more in this video. So once we stop, you'll be able to go back and kind of zip through and find. I had a lot of information about the time period, about Theodoric, about the local town structure. Just a little bit. I just touched a little bit on slavery and about the Ostrogoths and the Italians, quote, Romans, living together in harmony under Theodoric's rule. So that's it, guys. I am done. I want to thank you for being here. And thank you for your back-ends, because I'm just so jazzed about all this. Anyway, thank you for being here, and I am going to push the red button that stops the broadcast, and I will see you soon. You can leave me notes at the Kickstarter project or connect with me an email at zara@zaraaltair.com, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.